Hello and welcome to the 17th episode of the magazine monologues. Today's article is called Secret of the Whales. It is coming from the May 2021 edition of National Geographic. This is called the Ocean issue. Given that this is my first year having a National Geographic subscription, I'm not certain if they have an ocean issue every year. I would assume they do. That seems very on brand for National Geographic, but all that to say is it is the ocean issue, but it's also the May 2021 issue/edition. Yeah. Couple of things unrelated to the article. First of all, if you remember a few episodes ago, I talked about how the next deadly plague or something along the lines of that, the one about fungal infections, the title of the article and the headline of the magazine were different, even though they were the same. That is not the way it works with National Geographic. The article, the magazine is headline Secrets of Whales. The actual article itself is also headline Secrets of Whales. Another weird, fun magazine fact. I don't know why, and I should have gotten an example, but National Geographic is shorter than basically all the other magazines are basically the exact same height and the exact same width, but National Geographic is smaller in these dimensions. I don't know if it has to do with like the photographs or like the style of paper, or I don't know. It's just like a weird fun fact. But yeah, so the article is called Secrets of the Whales. It's written by Craig Welch, who is an environmental writer with National Geographic. I don't know anything beyond that. I do know that Craig Welch did a big story/expedition for National Geographic involving a road trip across the US. I only know that because they talked about it at the end of the article, saying that's who he was. I had to look up online and find out that he was an environmental writer. All right, so there's not a whole lot of like numbers or stats or years or anything like that in this article, so I'm going to stay away from that. The article is more just like an explanation or an exposition, I guess, of like contemporary / a little bit of the research history surrounding whales and dolphins. All that to say, and so I want to say up front, I thought that this article was like wildly interesting. And I said that at the end of the last episode that I never filmed this because I'm insanely lazy and I need to work on that. But this article was insanely interesting. It was like captivating, like whatever word you want to put in there, I loved it. So it talks mostly about whales, but whales, dolphins, crows, bees even, I believe they mentioned, as well as a bunch of other animals, display signs of culture. And so the first 25% of the article is kind of this discussion of like, do scientists think that culture requires intelligence? Can culture be independent of intelligence? And it discusses that. It sounds like the general consensus is that culture does not require a high level of intelligence. Bees, for example. I know the article's not about bees, but the example they use is like bees clearly are not highly intelligent. Whales, dolphins, crows, you can kind of make some arguments. But like bees, no. But there are like different hives of the exact same species of bees I actually don't entirely know the correct verb to use here. I know they pollinate, but I assume they also eat these things. Like I don't know a lot about bees is what I'm realizing in the moment right now. But so they'll pollinate or interact with different flowers and different species of flowers, even though the bee hives could be, 2 miles apart, right? But like the hive just kind of learns from the other members that are within this hive to like, oh, go to daffodils or use daisies or that kind of thing. That's just one very brief example. There's a lot more deeper examples with the whales, which I'm going to focus on. So the first 25% is just this discussion of like, does culture require intelligence? Scientists, I don't think it does, but intelligence obviously helps, right? Like human beings compose symphonies, and that's an aspect of culture. And it's just easier. But there's that whole discussion. Then the rest kind of, the middle 50% kind of focuses on whales and like the different ways that you can observe culture within whales, and to a smaller extent in the article, dolphins, but let's say whales. A couple of the examples. Killer whales or orcas, or I'm sure there's some other name I don't know. Killer whales is what I'm going with. So you have like the northern killer whales, you have southern killer whales within the Pacific, and there are other ones. The example that they used was, I believe in the 90s, there were some killer whales off of the northwest coast of Washington that had gotten kind of trapped in this cove, and they were essentially getting caught for like SeaWorld or like other marine parks. It happened all the time in the 90s. It like sounds, saying it out loud, it sounds really terrible to like corral these animals into a shallow water cove when they're used to like, it just sounds really terrible when I say it out loud. And like, I know that when I was younger, I think 11-ish, we went to a sea lake. Like Alaska doesn't have this kind of thing, right? But like, we went to a SeaWorld in Florida, I want to say. And I thought it was really cool. The older I get, the more I think that those kind of things might be kind of terrible. Just because, like, especially on the whale front, like whatever with small fish or squid or like, you know, octopus or whatever, and like if you have a 10,000 gallon aquarium for some octopus, like cool. I think whales just should stay in the ocean, but I'm getting off track here. So the culture. So what happened is they trapped them in this cove, and they took some of them, and they were going to feed them salmon because they were like, oh, the killer whales that live closer to where the park was eat salmon. We'll feed them salmon. The whales weren't eating. It was 70 days, 70 give or take some days, before the whales ate again, and here is why. Different pods of killer whales eat different things. Yeah, they are like genetically identical, right? And this is the exact same story with humans, right? I eat burgers. People in China eat rice. People in Italy eat pasta. People in I don't know, India don't eat goat, you know, or not goat, don't eat cows. I had a different story that I was going to tell in my head, but don't eat cows, like et cetera, like all these stories, right? Killer whales have the exact same thing. There are killer whales who only eat salmon. There are killer whales who only eat sharks or like other whale calves. There are killer whales that eat only sea lions, and all this was talked about in the article. And so this pod that they had captured them from were not salmon eaters. They just weren't, right? Like imagine getting captured and some people just serving you like a plate of dead bugs. I would not eat that immediately. It'd be a few days, you know, depending on how hungry I get, right? And that's kind of what had happened with these whales, is they were captured, and I believe that these whales ate sea lions. That was what they generally ate. But they were being fed salmon. The park managers / distributors of these captured whales were like getting really confused. They didn't know what was going on. And so that's when they discovered that these were not salmon eaters. And they eventually trained them to be salmon eaters just because it's not going to go over well if you throw a live seal into a show. That doesn't seem like kid-friendly to me. But fish, kind of whatever. What were some of the other... So food is one example. Other examples that they had were humpback whales in the Pacific will adopt songs. They'll adopt new songs for like mating rituals, which you might think sounds kind of normal. The analogy that's given is the analogy as if I moved to Norway and Norway started to play the American national anthem. Like that's the analogy. That's how wild and weird it is. Birds, when birds join a new flock, they mimic the flock's song. Not their old song, not their new, like the flock doesn't mimic them, they mimic the new song. Things like that. With humpback whale songs, I cannot extrapolate this because I have no idea and I'm not a whaleologist or whatever the word would be. But with humpback whales, what will happen is the males will generally, a song will start somewhere around Australia / the southwest corner of the Pacific, generally, according to the article. And there will be some sort of innovation, and you know, maybe this whale goes out and like joins a new pod, or just it travels something like 500 miles. So maybe just another whale hears it, and then they adopt it, and it propagates. And it takes, I believe the article said 2 years, give or take a little bit, to go from Australia to more or less the Pacific Northwest, so like Southwest Canada, Alaska, Washington, etc. So across the Pacific Basin. And it's roughly just like this 2-year cycle of just new songs always propagating. And I mean, you've got like what was the analogy that they had? I believe they said that the whales are always chasing the new hip tune. So, you know, maybe 10 years ago, and I'm making this part up, this was not in the article. Maybe 10 years ago, really deep songs were in vogue, And then now it's all about high-pitched clicks or things like that. So that was really interesting. Another one is, and this will be probably the last example I use. This one was what I thought was the wildest. So yes, learning new songs, like cool, whatever, like people kind of know that. The killer whales eating different things. That one is interesting, right? Like I would have never guessed that, right? I never would have in a million years been like, oh yeah, the killer whale won't eat this shark. It'll only eat seals or whatever. And the killer whale thing, they also talked about different ways they hunt. Different killer whale pods will like stun groups of fish with air bubbles from their blowholes. Some will use their flukes to like really mash up the water and disorient the fish. Some killer whales will coordinate together and like use their flukes to basically cause like a mini tidal wave on ice floats and the seals fall in the water, like all of that, right? That was all in the killer whale section. But here's the more insane one to me. And actually, this won't be my last one. I will do one more after this, a small one, but this will be the next one. So, sperm whales. Sperm whales rear their young in different ways based on pods or clans or whatever, because I believe pod is the like family unit essentially. Family unit's not the right word either. It's more of like an extended family unit, tribe you could say, whereas clan is like a collection, so it's like multiple of them. But the pods will rear their young in different ways. In some pods, the mother nurses the baby. Easy. Like I would have assumed that was the way everywhere for all mammals, right? It's not. Another way is one mother or one female whale will nurse the calves, like all the calves, or all is a strong term. Will nurse up to 2 of the calves. The calves are probably not hers though. She's just like a wet nurse. Alternatively, there's another way where the feeding for calves is split, but it's only split within genetic lines, which seems insane to me to think about. So when I say within genetic lines, I mean a mother will feed the calf her milk, or a grandmother will feed the calf the milk. The grandmother will not feed the calf if it is not like its grandchild. It feels, I don't know the term for whales, but if it's not its second generation offspring, it won't feed it, right? So if I'm a cow, or not a cow, if I'm a whale calf, my mother would feed me, my grandmother would feed me. My friend's grandmother would not. And like they somehow know that. And that just seems wild to me. I can't really express how insane that seems to be, that animals are aware of like multiple generations of their young. That seemed like an innate, like a uniquely human thing, potentially uniquely primate. It wouldn't have surprised me if it's like chimpanzees or gorillas or something. Yeah, it's cool, but not super surprising. Very surprising for whales or dolphins or things like that. And there were some other examples they had for the way that they like feed their young, but those were the big ones. And that was what blew my mind, was the multi-generational aspect. Blew my mind. And then the fourth minor one is so back to the sperm whales as well. The clans of sperm whales will have unique like clicking, like ways to click. So it's not like they just like, oh, all clans or all whales within this clan say or book or whatever, right? It's more like a dialect. So it's more akin to I'm speaking versus somebody from Alabama speaking versus somebody from Brooklyn speaking, right? We're all speaking the whale language, but it sounds different. And they're called click codas, so it's not a perfect dialect analogy, but they're called click codas. And that is, I guess, a very new discovery. They were talking, like, in the article, they talked to scientists who discovered this very recently in the Caribbean. And the theory, I should say, is that these click codas are used to, and it might be coda click if you go to Google it. I apologize if I got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's click coda. The click coda are used to denote clan membership, because the sperm whales almost always are with their pod, but they will spend time with other whale members of their clan, like their extended, like multiple pods. They will never interact with each other if they're not within the same clan. And so the click codas is what the theory is, that that's the way that they denote, like, hey, I'm from clan A, or I'm from clan B, or I'm from clan C, or etc. Yeah, so that was the very broad overview of all the different ways they talked about culture within whales and dolphins. The last 25% is the author going to some sort of, again, I don't know what you would call a whale song studier, but an audiologist, we could say. And just like listening to the different songs like with headphones, and when it was too high or too low for humans to perceive, you could digitally manipulate it to make it hearable. And they just talked about that experience of how it was like, oh yeah, like it was really cool, or you could hear this, melody actually. So you can digitally analyze the songs, and you actually find melodies within whale songs, like humpback whale songs specifically will have melodies. I'm sure others will. But yeah, I thought the article was mind-blowing. National Geographic, admittedly, is more known for their pictures. I just opened up randomly to this one in the whale section, which means like the whale article is 40 pages, but 34 of those are pictures. And that's fine. I like the pictures. I like the pictures a lot. They have cool captions, right? Like I open it up and it's just, let me find one. Just be like, oh, so, a picture of all these beluga whales, and then they've got a little, 4 or 5 sentence blurb here talking about what's going on in the picture. And I like that. That's cool. National Geographic, I really like. So far, actually, to be honest, I've liked all the magazines I've read, except I didn't love Travel and Leisure, as I stated. I'm going to do a video on Boat International, but not really about an article, and you'll understand why when I do that video shortly. But yeah, I've enjoyed all the magazines. Admittedly, it is time-consuming and hard to keep up with all of them, and I fall way behind. I have like 9 magazines sitting over there waiting to get read. I'm not going to read them all. I basically kind of just very quickly flip through all the magazines, and I look, if something catches my eye, I just read it. Which isn't a perfect system, because I know that there's going to be things that I miss that I maybe should read for personal edification or well-roundedness or just interest or whatever, but it's what I got to work with all the magazines that I kind of manically subscribe to. Yeah, the next article is, I believe, coming also out of the same National Geographic, but I will need to double check. Thank you.